Hey, this is Robert. Welcome back to another episode of 84 Square Feet, where I talk about my time that I did in solitary confinement in Ely, Nevada. That's right, it's one of those out in the middle of nowhere places in Nevada. Today, this is a really special episode because we're going to start answering some questions. About 9 months ago or so, I put out on Facebook, like, hey, if anybody has any questions about solitary confinement, I'd be more than happy to answer. And I got inundated with questions, but good news is we've got some of them all broken down here. I'm going to be reading them off and answering what I can. So what I did is I grouped them together. This way I can answer kind of blocks of questions that are all kind of related, because there was a lot of really great ones. Some were really specific and some were just a little bit more general. So hopefully we can answer some of those as we go along, and it'll just kind of help the story flow as we go. So I'm not going to waste any more time because this is going to be a fun episode. I'm really looking forward to doing more of these. And you know what? If you have future questions, don't be afraid to drop them in the comments or head over to the website at 84squarefeet.com. There is a contact form there. You can fill that out and it'll be great. So here we go. Let's dive into the questions. The first set of questions all really had to do with how did I get there? Like, what led to me getting there? And then that first initial period of being in solitary confinement. So from Renee, it says, did you ever go to a dark place? Did you strategize on how to escape? Did you think of hurting people? Was your personality completely different there? You always seem so jovial and welcoming and upbeat. I can't imagine you any other way. Also, what did you do in the first place? Why were you in there? And we had a few other ones that were like that. Archie Jameson said, whoa, what happened? And then we had Sheldon. What led up to you being sent to prison is probably the first one I would ask. So, pre-prison, right? Like, I had a pretty decent drug addiction issue. I was heavily addicted to methamphetamine. I was shooting up every day, using needles. I made a mess of my life. I was out in Las Vegas. I was homeless. I was living out of a car, living out of a hotel, living wherever I could lay my head, really. Life was bad. I was shooting up every single day. In that time, I amassed all sorts of felonies. I think by the time I got arrested, July 26th of 2010, I had accumulated 53 B and C level felonies. And in Nevada, what that means is a B level felony is going to have a top end of around 20 years. A C level felony, I believe, I think it's a top end of 10 or something like that. Anyway, long story short, I had to go to court a whole bunch of times, and I ended up on all 53 of those felonies. And they were for everything from drugs, selling drugs, possession of identification, credit cards. All sorts of crazy stuff that I was involved in while I was there. So I get arrested, and I thought I was only going to be in jail for maybe a week or two, and then they'd just kick me back out like they always had. But on the way to the jail, the cop said, oh no, I think you're going to be sitting down for a minute on this one. So as things started to progress, because you sit in jail for a little while you're fighting your case and that sort of thing. I did that, ended up going to prison just shortly before Christmas, I believe it was. My sentence overall was a 3-year to 10-year sentence. So I will never forget the day that the judge handed down that sentence, and I heard him say, you are now hereby sentenced to the state of Nevada Department of Corrections for a period of 36 months to 120 months. Now let that sink in. When you're talking 120 months, it's 10 years. You start to add up, man, I'm going to miss some birthdays. I'm going to miss some family stuff. I hope my parents are still alive. I hope friends of mine, just all the things you miss out on. And so standing there in that courtroom that day, I knew that I had really messed up. But then I got to prison and I was like, maybe I didn't mess up that bad. And I just didn't have the street out of me, I guess is the best way that I can describe it. So I still thought I could, be doing some hustles and stuff like that. I started talking to a few people. Word got out about what my charges were, this and that. Anyway, somebody says, well, why don't you use some of those credit cards that you still have access to? Why don't you use them to get stuff for other inmates here and then they can pay you? And it was this whole thing. And I ended up doing it because I don't know why. Was I bored? Was I a hard-headed dingle schnutz? Yes, I was probably a hard-headed dingle schnutz. So I ended up getting caught up in that. And here I am. I'm out in Nevada. I don't have any family that's like real close to me or anything there. I had like one or two people that I was writing at that point. And I just got caught up in the lie that I would be able to make myself all self-sufficient and I wouldn't have to worry or depend on anybody else. I wouldn't have to ask anybody else for money. And so I get caught up in this. Somebody ends up ratting me out to a lieutenant, and I'll never forget the day. I was in the kitchen. I was working my kitchen job. I was baking bread or something like that. And I see like four dudes, big dudes, come down this hallway, and I could see them through this glass, and I'm like, oh man, they look like they're on a mission. Oh, they were on a mission, all right. So I watch them like walk through the kitchen, and then they start walking close, and I'm like, dang, I wonder who they're here for. And then I get thrown up against the wall and handcuffed. So that's how that all ended. So I ended up going in to see the lieutenant. He had me basically on the phone talking to somebody, and the guy that I was talking to on the phone said something that tipped them off. And long story short, he was like, you're going to the hole. And I said, to the hole? Like, I mean, this isn't. He says, well, here's how the state of Nevada works. You're here on 4 different charges. We go on a point system. So your point system right now, let's say, I don't even know what the exact numbers were, but let's say I was at 16 points on all 4 of my charges, right? So at 20 points or whatever it was the threshold to be sent to solitary confinement. And my write-up, being what it was like 6 more points, which puts me over. So it was an automatic, you're going to solitary confinement. I went back to my cell. I couldn't comprehend, like, what is going on? Are you kidding me? Not violent, yes, it was a dumb thing that I did. It was absolutely stupid. Shouldn't have done it. Absolutely. But when he sentenced me to 2 years in solitary confinement, I just couldn't even wrap my head around that. So I walked back to my cell knowing, like, I'm going to be going to the hole. And not just for a short amount of time. I'm going to be going for a minute. I'm sitting down for 2 years. And I'm just sitting there. I'm talking to people. They're trying to give me advice. And I'm like, my mind just wanted it to stop. Because I knew the weight of what I was about to go into. So I hope that answers a little bit of that. But yeah, so drug addiction was a big part of what led me to prison, my initial charges. And then to fuel the whole drug addiction, it was doing a lot of fraud, whether it was checks, credit cards, or any other type of scam or anything like that. It's always been that kind of energy, and I hated that. But that's what led to that moment there in prison, and then that initial conversation with the lieutenant, and then me getting sentenced. Kenny said, what were you locked up for? What was the minimum? How long did you do? And why were you put in a hole? I hope I just answered most of that. The minimum sentence where I was at was a 3-year, and then the maximum controlling sentence was 10. So I did a 3-year to 10-year sentence, and we'll get into the exacts about why I ended up doing 5 instead of 3. So we have Jennifer Baker said, why did you spend 2 years like that? Yeah, that was the whole thing that led up to that, was that incident right there when I was still trying to do things in a scandalous, scammy type way. I mean, that's, I can't blame anybody else but myself for going to the hole. I absolutely did it to myself. Do I think I deserve 2 years? No. I think that there probably could have been a different approach. Maybe, uh, I don't know. Do I deserve some punishment for what I did? I absolutely feel that I did. But 2 years in the hole, I did feel was a little excessive. Victoria, Miko, was the 2 years continuous or was it broken up, totaling 2 years? And also, when was this within the 5 years, the beginning, the middle, or towards the end? So, great questions. So, I got to prison in 2010. I went to the hole in 2011. So, I was on the yard in general population for probably, I don't know, 8 months, maybe a year, something like that. And then I got caught up in that whole scam thing. So then I did my 2 years in solitary, and then they released me back out to a general population yard just to get me reacclimated. And then I ended up going to a conservation camp to do wildland firefighting and all that kind of stuff, way, way up in northern Nevada. So that's when that was. And then Brian Camstra, one of my coworkers at Crossroads, asked, what was going through your head or what kind of thoughts did you have during your first month in the hole? And what was going through your head and your thoughts during your last month in the hole? Did things change or did they stay the same? Great question, Brian. So things for me did change a lot. That first month in the hole, I'll tell you what, my first day in the hole, one of the first things that I remember thinking to myself was, I really messed up this time. I really, like, my best efforts at life have landed me in this box that is 6 feet wide and 14 feet long. And this is where I get to spend 23 hours a day plus for the next 2 years. So, yeah, I had that come to Jesus moment, I guess you could almost say it is, but it's one of those moments where like, I just did some damage to my life. And it was really, really starting to sink in that first month that I was there. So I appreciate you guys checking out the first episode. If you haven't already checked it out, definitely go over and check out the first episode. I went through and read one of the letters that I had written to my mom while I was in solitary confinement. I really go through page by page, and it shows the inside raw realness of some of the challenges that are going on in solitary confinement with the whole moving, the prison bus, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't checked it out, I'll have a tag to the video here up in the top corner. But I have got 2 years worth of these letters. Some of them are 5, 6 pages, all detailed about stuff that's happening, my mindset, things I was feeling, going through, things I was thinking. I read some of these now and I'm like, part of me is embarrassed. There's some embarrassing things in there, but then there's also things that I look at maybe and I say, wow, I'm the same person, but I have grown in some areas so much, and I'm happy that I've grown in those areas. So I'm going to be reading the letters word for word. You're going to be able to get a true window into where I was at and what I was going through while I was in solitary confinement. And if you have any questions about that period, please drop them down in the comments. Head over to the website at 84squarefeet.com. I'd be happy to check out your comments and see if we can include it in on one of these next episodes. Reading through the letters and going through some of these questions, it really does give you a good window into seeing exactly what stuff is like in one of the solitary confinement prisons that's here in the United States. What do you think of solitary confinement? I'm open to your thoughts, even if we're on different sides. Nothing changes if we don't have a conversation. So I'd be curious to just hear, like, what are your thoughts on solitary confinement? So that was the first set of questions that we had for today. The welcome to the hole questions, I call them. Thanks for submitting those. I really appreciate it. If you have any follow-up questions, again, don't hesitate to drop them down in the comments. But that's all I got for today. I hope you guys are having a great day. Be blessed and be a blessing. wherever you're at.